So I just wanted to share a little bit. Can everybody see me well? I mean, with my 6'4" stature, I'm sure you can see everything of me. I just wanted to give you a little bit of family history before I share a little bit of my story. And so thankfully I don't have mics that contain me, because you're going to learn very quickly, being Italian, I either knock people over, I hit them by mistake, but it's really part of just my movements, right? So if you see me doing all these things, it's just part of who I am. So a little bit of my family history was I was born and raised in Montreal, Quebec. So my family is Italian, or some people, call it Italian, but people are from Italy, not Italy. So part of what I was going to talk about is a little bit about my brothers and my family. So I'm the middle, actually I would like to be the middle, I'm the youngest of three brothers. So my oldest brother is called Donato, which is very Italian. My middle brother is called Tony, or also Antonio. And then my mom called me Jimmy. I asked my mom the question. She said it just ended with a Y, so I just thought it fit. So I don't really have an Italian name, so I got to kind of bring it back to James or Giacomo. So it doesn't really sound good, so people just call me Jimmy. But growing up, one of the biggest things with my family was people yelled. People thought we were just talking. My grandfather was yelling all the time. Most of the times, just talking with my mom, but that's just how they were conversing and questions and how they were. So I lived in Montreal for about 18 years, and when I was about 14, I had something in my heart. I was born and raised in a really good family, in a good high school and everything, and for some reason at 14 years old, I had this thing within me that I just had a desire to know about what was my purpose on earth. At 14, it's not a typical question that most people would ask, but that was something that I was thinking about, and my older brother was 15 and 17, we're pretty close at that point. All three of us were just, again, not terrible kids. We did some stuff that probably wasn't great, but we just had this desire. And long story short, all three of us brothers, we started just reading the Bible. We thought it was something we just should start to read. Now this, again, kind of completely out of the ordinary. And my mom and my dad, who were wonderful parents, just never really told us what to do, what not to do for the most part. But there was something about that night. I was 14 going to bed one night, and I just had this heart within me, that faith in Christ. It was something real to me. And then my journey of life from who I was became very different in high school, and how I interacted with people, what I talked about, how I conducted myself. And at about 3 months in, I was literally asking people, can I go to church? It's kind of a different story. And then about 6 months later, my mom and my dad, born and raised again, good parents, saw such a difference in all three of us brothers that they said, we want to follow the same Jesus. And this was a really interesting story, because that's not typically how it happens. My parents saw such a big difference in our lives and a lot of our friends. So amidst this travel and this journey, I've been all over places and traveled a lot of different places. And I've lived I lived about 18 years in Montreal. So let me just kind of show you. This is my family currently. I was talking about my brothers before. As you can see, all three of us Italians, kind of like Gino's, but we're going to leave that there, and I'll keep this to later. So I have three kids. My oldest is Luca, and my middle daughter, Lexi, she's 7 years old, and my youngest is Liam, he's 3 years old. So I have three kids, my wife and I, beautiful wife, beautiful family, and we learned lots of different things. We just kind of, as a family, we just kind of journeyed together and did different things along the side. One of the big things about us as a family, well, maybe I like to conduct it as myself. We're big Montreal Canadiens fans, so hopefully that's not a problem to you guys. All right. I mean, when we get to heaven, there'll be Habs fans and Italians anyway, so we'll be fine. So in my faith journey, I've experienced some ups, some downs, some different journeys. So a lot of good stuff, but then life came a little bit crashing down at one point in our life. And it was our first child, Luca, and it was my son. And what I'm going to share with you is, it's going to be a little bit emotional, because every time I go back to share the story, this was real, and this was very obviously emotional, right? So almost 8 years ago, on January 30th, 2011, I was driving home from my in-laws. And as I was driving home in the west end of Ottawa, I was in the driver's seat. My wife was in the passenger seat. She was 8 months pregnant, which is my daughter, who's alive and doing well right now. And my son, Luca, was 2.5. And a young kid who was 17 years old went 100 kilometers an hour and ran through a red light. And he hit all the impact on my son in the back. And when that happened, not only did the car spin, but life started spinning, and that's where things started to change. My son was grasping for breath. I couldn't even hear him. I didn't want to look in the back. It happened so quick. And we were taken to the Queensway Carleton Hospital while my son was helicoptered to Chio. And we had no idea what was going to go on because my wife was dealing with some labor that she was dealing with that was false labor at the time, but we couldn't really leave each other. My amazing in-laws, my father-in-law, was at Chio and stayed there. There was a doctor there. His name was Dr. Zhao, who I'll never forget, and we still are in contact today. I call him my friend because Luke is his friend. And nobody was willing to touch my son on that operating table except this doctor. And they didn't really give him any chance to live. They said he was not going to make it. But this Dr. Zhao said, I'm going to do whatever I can. And he told me, and he told every one of us as a family, at this point, we're living moment by moment. A lot of my life, as I talk about this, is appreciating and loving moments, because moments are what makes us in relationship with people. Moments and stories of other people is what allows us to learn and grow together. The next few months, to be honest, was a living nightmare. On day 4, I remember being in ICU at Chio, and I was in the bed, hospital bed, and I was praying to God, and I'm saying, God, I just need to know you're with me. And it's hard to explain it, but I felt an incredible peace. Not necessarily knowing the outcome of what was about to happen, but knowing that God was with me. And that was something that started to carry me through a lot of that as a family. And I learned very quickly that not everybody makes it through traumatic situations. They're very different. And with my son, he had a traumatic brain injury. Yeah, half of his brain was gone. It was that severe when I saw the pictures of the scans. But a little miracle happened on day 8. They called us in. It was the first day that we went home. And they called us and they said, you need to come in. Luca was in an induced coma because he couldn't have any secondary injuries because it was so serious what he was dealing with. So they had to induce him. And I remember at that time, they said he's not going to make it, bring all the family, call everybody in. It was 3 a.m. It was a Sunday morning. And we finally got there. And at about 9 a.m., I decided to use Facebook and to send out a Facebook message to ask churches, it was Sunday morning, or anybody I knew to pray. People prayed, and I learned a lot more later. And about 9 o'clock, 9:30 o'clock, the radiologist came up to me and says, I need to talk to you. So we went up to her, and she says, what happened is Luca's right lung collapsed. And being a small, fragile child, there's not much chance. But when she showed me everything, she says, I don't understand. But everything's clear all of a sudden. And it was a miracle, and they didn't understand how to explain it. At that moment, I realized God's given me another chance, or given him another chance. Now, stories don't always end up this way, and I've learned this through time, is that this is my story, and this is what happened. But that moment was the start of recognizing that God and all the faith that I endured in my life early as a young teenager, and my foundation had to be strong, because going through something like we went through was not easy, to say the least. Luca was at Chio for 8 months. I pretty much lived there. And it was not fun, I have to say. But at the same time, I was flooded with emails of support, love, community of people just talking about Luca, praying for Luca. I heard stories about kids, young kids on their knees, 3, 4 years old, from Taiwan, from Korea, praying for Luca, like they didn't even know who he was. People from all over the world, a young person from Ireland, nuns praying for us, for Luca. They don't even know who he is, but a connection to a connection to a connection. incredible amount of people praying, sending money. They did a big fundraiser, and I mean, it was just to recognize that there's so many people that were caring. So, I fast-tracked the story to say this. Luca got discharged from CHIO, and we thought, okay, this is a turning point. You got to understand, at this point, Luca can't do anything. He's completely dependent in every facet. G-tube fed, lost his speech, everything. He had nothing. We had to carry him. And they told us when we would take him home, and we had to move from Carlton Place, we moved all the way to Alta Vista, just to be right near CHIO. And they told us that things were going to get better. And I thought, okay, what does better mean? And you know what? We moved to Alta Vista, we got Luca in there, and things weren't better. Luca was screaming 16 hours a day. And it was hard, because when you see your own child suffering, it's the hardest thing in the world. And my family, the anxiety, the anxiousness, the questions that I asked God, why? Why my son? What has he done? What does he deserve to be in this place? And he did nothing wrong. And I was angry. I was sad. There were a lot of emotions. It's hard to see beyond, but I knew in the midst of it all, one thing, no matter what, with all the questions I had, why God? Why? I never once questioned God's existence and God being with me and my family. And those are two things that I understand as a foundation, having that as a young teenager carried me to this moment, to know that if I wasn't in this place and had my faith journey with Christ, I knew I wouldn't be standing there. There's no way I would make it. Although Luca's not able to speak and talk and walk, and he's G2 fed, the one thing about Luca, and God's taught me, is that he's touched so many people's lives. In those 8 months I was at CHIO, as the hard moments of difficulty of your child's not going to be able to do what, I said, God, help me understand why I'm in this picture of my family. Random people would be showing up in hospital beds with families and kids. And Luca couldn't say one word. And they said, there's something about this child. He's illuminating something that's real. I can't explain it. And people would talk this way. And then I'm like, we can't say a word. But that's how the picture was unfolding. We see this picture today. This is not a picture I saw of my son 8 years ago. I didn't think he'd survive. In this picture, he's in a stander, and he's happy. My son, pretty much for the most part, every day of his life, for the last while, I don't even care about what he can or cannot do. He is happy, loving life, and smiling every single day to remind me where he's come from, and the miracle of normal is not the definition of what we consider normal at times. My normal life before I came here, lifting up my son, giving him a bath, doing all the stuff, helping with my family. That's just what I do every day now. But I love my son, I love my daughter, I love my other son, and I love my wife, and I love my family. When you look at everything we walk through in life, at the time I was in it, I couldn't see beyond a lot of stuff. And I always call it like the Kleenex box situation, where you have the Kleenex box right here, and as you're going through some really difficult times, and then things start to get a little bit clearer, I'm able to see a little bit more. Well, it took me a long time to come from here to here. But everything we walk through in life, there's a purpose, and there's a story. Sometimes I feel like when we're in the midst of what we walk through, and I've shared just a little pocket of my life, we forget about everybody's story and what people walk through every day. I have a story, you have a story, everybody's got a story. Everybody's on a journey of where they're at. You may be going through struggles now, you may not be. You may face them at some point. But one thing in my story that I always recognize is that without God, I wouldn't be able to be where I'm at, standing even here today. My wife and I never even contemplated the idea of not being together. And we were told at CHIO many, many times, that most people don't make it through. They don't make it through, their marriage falls apart, everything falls apart. But I thank God. I'm not saying everything's been easy, because we've struggled, a lot of challenges, a lot of real stuff that you walk through. You're faced with a lot of questions in your own life, how you're going to handle stuff and how you're going to deal with stuff. But I was broken, and sometimes we're broken in lives and stuff that we walk through every day, good and bad times. But I can say today, without a shadow of a doubt, that I don't look back to what has happened, but I look forward to what God can do in my life now and more. And that's hard to say because someone always asked me in the early stages, and I didn't want to face the question is, do you think your life would be easier if Luca didn't make it? That's not a fun question to be faced with. But I don't need to worry about that question because it never happened, but I had to face that question that it could have been. Let me tell you, early in the stages when Luca was not doing very well and he was crying and in pain every day, I thought about those moments and my wife and I talked about it. But we've lived to that point till now. Luca's made it to this point, and our families together, we had another child, Liam, who's 3 years old. We kept dreaming, we kept believing, because a lot of people thought, why are you having another child? You have a special needs child. What are you doing? I'm like, we got to keep dreaming. We got to keep believing. So it never stopped us from knowing that there's more. There's always going to be more. So the question I want to bring to a lot of us is, whatever journey you're going in, or whatever journey you're part of, whatever suffering that you're dealing with, Jesus can fix and help you through that. And we need people around us. One thing I really learned is that letting people into your lives and gathering and helping you is one of the most important things. My high school, my church, my family, people were part of the story. So when you're suffering, let people in. Allow people to be part of that story. It's wonderful because people want to be help. They want to be able to help. So that's the question I want to leave you today with. That is I just urge you to just look at just a little snippet of my life and know that in your life, whatever you're walking through, Christ can help you through those moments now and for the future. Thank you.